Welcome again. My name is Emeka Ogwonye. We are continuing our discussion and analysis of the investigation of Chidinma Ojukwu in the murder case of Usifo Ataga. We must admit that the source of information many of us are relying upon is the statement which Chidinma Ojukwu gave to the public when she was paraded by the police. That is one thing, one source that nobody could call speculative. That is one source we are sure of. This 21-year-old woman at some point was brought out to the public by the police after 3 or 4 days in their custody, and allowed her unfettered ability to speak to the press. Or more importantly, they allowed the press, the public, everybody who cared, unfettered access to her, unfettered ability to ask her question, any kind of question, for any length of time, and to take pictures of her. We also even learned that after that public parading, it seemed that the police allowed the journalists to interview her, which was when she was said to be pleading for her life and regretting what happened. So it's important for those of us who try to make sense out of this case to examine step by step the statements Chidinma made, the relevant parts of that statement. As I indicated in my earlier presentation, the woman did not confess completely. She did not admit to all the elements of facts that would have constituted murder. So she did not confess. She admitted some relevant facts, but she also invoked impliedly 2 defenses at least: the defense of intoxication or lack of sobriety, and importantly, the defense of self-defense. Self-defense is a complete defense. If it is accepted, then she's not culpable for murder. So that is one thing we have to understand. And another issue is how much of what she said was believed by the police, and how much of what she said was disbelieved by the police. It would have been possible for us to answer that question if the police had somehow indicated the direction of investigation after she was interrogated. The police did not do that. The police left us with her statement. However, there are indications that the police accepted at least a part of her story. In the interview reported by Punch, the commissioner of police was asked why he released or he approved the release of the father of Chidinma, who was arrested along with her for impeding her arrest, and a woman who was the manager of the apartment where the incident occurred, who was also arrested at the beginning. When the police commissioner was asked why he released them, he said, in his view, they were exonerated by Chidinma's story. Indeed, he said, I paraphrase to the journalists, you heard what Chidinma said. You heard that she exculpated. In other words, she exonerated these 2 people. In other words, based on what Chidinma said, we had to release these 2 individuals. So one could say to that extent that the commissioner of police found Chidinma to be truthful, at least in respect of that part. Now the question is, did they find her truthful? in respect of the rest of her stories, particularly her theory of self-defense. Many people in the social media have formed absolute opinions on this matter. Some believe that she's a cold-blooded killer that killed a man and that her motive was to rob him. But there are problems, many problems. One, if all she did was to steal his ATM card after killing him, then the question becomes, who gave her the PIN, access PIN to the ATM card? How did she get access PIN to the ATM card? It was either that she obtained it from the dead man somehow, because the dead man would not give access to her to the PIN after he was already dead. So that remains a question. Did she have the PIN before he died? Did she get the PIN on a different occasion? Or did she force him to give her the PIN before killing him? And then you look closely at her story of how the killing occurred. She said she was running away from him. He was pursuing her, according to her. And she ran into the kitchen and saw a kitchen knife and picked it up and stabbed him. Before you dismiss that story, you must ask yourself, when the police got in there, did they see a different murder weapon? Or did they find that the murder weapon was consistent with the kitchen knife? And if she used the kitchen knife to kill Mr. Ataga, then the question of premeditation comes in. Did she plan the murder? For how long did she plan it? Normally, when a person plans murder, the person also considers the weapon to be used. This is not a rocket science. If you go to Google and search murder weapons, choice of murder weapons, factors that influence choice of murder weapons, you'll be very enlightened on this. It's very rare for a woman to use a kitchen knife against a male target in a premeditated murder, unless the male target is asleep or incapacitated somehow. And people pursuing this theory want to say that Chidinma drugged Mr. Ataga. But if you start thinking she drugged him, that means you are disbelieving the story the police made her give the people. Because in that story she said they were both taking drugs and drinking. It didn't indicate that he was giving her drugs or that she was giving him drugs. It suggests that both of them were voluntarily taking drugs and drinking. That's it. That's her story. So when you begin to say she drugged the man, that is your imagination. It is not within the statement she made. Also, there are certain things you can believe or you can assume to be correct. She had been in police custody. The police allowed her to make a statement. And she said it was a kitchen knife. So we have no reason to think that a different weapon was used. She also said, we were struggling with the kitchen knife and it broke. Again, there is no reason to think that that is false because she is in custody of the police. And the police saw the knife, saw the murder weapon. The police also saw the scene, the murder scene. So the police will know whether there was some sign of struggling prior to that. Before the police will put a person out and allow him or her to make statements to the press, the police are already sure of what the statement was going to be. The police must have listened to that statement several times and felt it was good to be told to the public. In other words, that this story, when told to the public, will suggest that the police had done its work of catching the criminal. So essentially, the police are saying, this is the story we are working on. She wouldn't go there advancing the theory of self-defense if the police thought it was not reasonable. If the police thought it was contradicted by the evidence they found on the scene of the crime. So you got to take what Chidinma is saying very seriously. Even though she was talking unaided, even though she was talking apparently without being coached by the police, what she said to the people must have been repeated to the police and rehearsed so many times, and the police accepted it as the account, the only account available, and put it out there. So her statement includes evidence of self-defense or stories of self-defense. If you believe her, then she cannot be guilty of murder. For her to be guilty of murder, then her story is not true. And for you to say her story is not true, the police must be able to contradict it somehow with other evidence. And the police have been silent on whether they have additional evidence to contradict her or whether they accepted her story, even though one can assume that they did. The police are not stupid. For them to allow her to speak, they knew what she was going to say. They were satisfied with what she was going to say. For them, that is the case. So, looking at the weapon used, and if you look at the literature on murder weapons, or weapons in homicide cases, let's talk about homicide. You find out that kitchen knives, the use of kitchen knife is consistent with spontaneous development. The use of kitchen knife by a woman on a man is consistent with spontaneous, unplanned event. So the choice of weapon could tell us about premeditation or the degree of premeditation. But I also have to admit that premeditation does not mean you have to spend hours or years in advance. Premeditation could be, the planning could be done within a day, within a few hours. But premeditation requires one to calculate, intend, plan out an outcome and desire that outcome. So to say there was premeditation in this case, you are suggesting that Chidinma wanted to kill this man, planned to kill him, set up everything in motion, and went ahead and killed her. Killed him. That's not consistent with what she said. That's not consistent with kitchen knife. That's not consistent with the little we know. So it is important to understand that insofar as Chidinma's account to the people during her parade forms the core of what we know or what we assume about the offenses, then the murder case is weak. The idea that she went and withdrew money from his bank account, that she admitted doing that. But the connection between that subsequent act and the murder act is something you have to be very careful about. She could have panicked. She could have thought of how to get out. And she could have thought, all right, let me get money from him. She would have thought of how to get out of trouble. Indeed, sometimes people, suspects, get involved in a homicide that is accidental. Accidental homicide. But they are scared of sticking around to account to defend, so they disappear. They run from the scene. Running away from the scene is not always conclusive evidence of cold-blooded, premeditated crime. It could just be escaping. So we don't know what it is. But nobody is satisfied so far. Nobody is satisfied. Emotionally, people are not satisfied. I read somewhere today that the family of Ataga are suggesting that Ataga was tortured, tied up and tortured, and then killed. If that was the case, if that theory stands, it means that Chidinma did not act alone. Chidinma alone will not be able to tie him up and torture him. So, but this is what the family of Ataga said. And by implication, they're saying they are not satisfied with the police. The same family had their lawyer yesterday telling people not to speculate on what happened, that they should wait for investigation. But the family is not following the example or following its own advice. Because if they advancing the theory of torture prior to killing, that in itself is speculation unless they declare the source of that information. It didn't come from the police because in all the interviews the police had given, we have not seen the police suggesting there was that torture. So, this case remains a mystery for several reasons. We don't know what happened. We are trying to make sense out of the chaos of all that is being said, snippets of information, rumors and fabrication and imagination in active drive. That's what we are seeing. On the other hand, we don't have the alternative luxury or the alternative opportunity, which would have been to go and keep quiet, forget this case, and wait until someday the court of law will find somebody guilty or not guilty, and then we will know the truth. It doesn't work that way. Societies don't work that way. Not even in the United States. People will form their opinion. People will prejudge situation. People will make guesses. People will make assumptions and speculate. That is what is happening here, and it will continue to happen. The issue is going to be how wild are these speculations? How wild are these conspiracy theories? It will depend on the police. If the police can tell us what they know, if the police can tell us what they think or what they suspect, or what their plans are for the completion of investigation and prosecution, then the speculations will become more controllable because people will be guided appropriately based on the police investigative work. In DPA, our goal is to help discuss these things in an organized manner, in an informed manner, so that our people, our members, will not get caught up in this endless circle of speculation and fabrication. So that our people will be guided, will be better informed than an average person in the society. So that is it. Another part of this story which I would like to address in my next talk has to do with the effect on the Ataga family of all these speculations. How the speculations are damaging their reputation. It's already bad enough that a married man will go consulting with a 21-year-old student. That's already bad enough. That's a bad situation. But the additional layers of speculation and negative talk against the Ataga family must be traumatizing, and we have to be very careful. We must be sensitive to the fact that there is a woman who just lost her husband. Regardless of the state of her relationship with her husband prior to his passing, he is the father of her children. So his passing is a grave concern to everybody in that family. The worst that could happen after losing a relative is to have incredible stories being spun out about him, thus damaging his reputation in more ways than anyone could imagine. Thank you so much for listening. We shall continue.